Thursday Night Tailgate, where the spotlight is always on the positive. Tune in Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time to hear your favorite NFL legends, players, and coaches sharing their stories. Now back to Chris and Bob.
I wouldn't joke about anything else that happened to you tonight.
And now back in making his fifth appearance with us here on Thursday Night Tailgate is Van Earl Wright. Van Earl is one of the great voices and broadcasters in the history of the business. There's an article from the School of Journalism and Mass Communications from his alma mater, the University of South Carolina, that says all you need to know about Van Earl Wright. And the article states, when he opens his mouth and the bellowing trombone that is his voice envelops your ears, you know you are not in the company of an ordinary individual. You're in the company of a man with one of the most recognizable voices in all of sports, and we couldn't agree with that statement more. Van Earl is quite simply one of the great talents and the great voices and broadcasters in the history of sports broadcasting. You've seen him on CNN Headline News, CNN Sports Tonight, CNN SI, NBC, CBS, Fox, HBO, Nickelodeon, MTV, Spike TV, and now Turner Sports. You've also heard him on great radio stations around the country, down in Beaumont, Texas, up in Detroit, and, of course, here in Atlanta. You can hear him doing play-by-play now for Turner Sports and WSB-TV in Atlanta, and we are very honored he is back with us again tonight here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Van Earl, Chris, and Bob, Happy New Year. How are you, my friend?
Happy 2019, and I know I think I say it every time, but I think I just agree to come on just for the introduction.
Okay, have a good night.
The ego is just, it inflates like 10 times during the introduction. So nice, over-the-top kindness, and I'm proud to be here.
Wow, we appreciate you, Van Earl. So it's been a minute, my friend, since we've had you back on the show. Catch us up. What's been going on with you?
Still doing the same thing. I've been working at Turner Sports and still working at WSB Television here in Atlanta and producing and doing some a little bit more on-air work lately on the weekends at Channel 2 in Atlanta and plugging right along and thankful every day.
So one of the shows I know you're involved with is Bulldogs Game Week here in town, and I want to get your assessment. You know, Georgia, the University of Georgia has been, it felt like, Van Earl, on the cusp of a national championship, certainly a couple of years ago, and this past season, right up there again. And, you know, you can argue that they were certainly one of the top 4 teams in the country. Unfortunately, didn't get into the playoffs, but your thoughts on what you've been able to witness from the Georgia Bulldogs. Is this a team you think can get over the hump next year?
Yeah, I definitely think they can get into the playoff next year. And Jake Fromm is the number one reason why. Haven't really been able to figure out why Kirby is taking so long to choose a defensive coordinator. I think that there are 2 guys on his staff, Glenn Schumann and Dan Lanning, both of whom coached the linebackers this past season. Lanning just finished his first season at Georgia, while Schumann has been on Kirby's staff since he returned to Athens. But I like the move of promoting the offensive coordinator, James Coley, to the full-time position. He has lots of experience calling plays. And our analyst, former Georgia quarterback DJ Shockley, thinks he's going to open it up a little bit more than Jim Chaney did. But Kirby loves to establish that run game, and he's not going to sling it around a la Sean McVay or some of these other offenses that we're watching transform the game of football. I think they're going to definitely be good enough to make it into the playoff next year, but I'm not sure they're going to have all the talent that they had a year ago with Roquan Smith and Nick Chubb and Sony Michel.
Van Earl, one of the things that has started to take place around college football is we're starting to see the number of quarterbacks transferring around really increase. And Georgia had a couple of them, and Jacob Eason going out to Washington about a year ago. Justin Fields recently leaving for Ohio State. We see now Jalen Hurts go from Alabama to Oklahoma. Your thoughts? What do you make of the rash of quarterbacks transferring?
More power to them. Good Lord. I mean, we all know the discrepancy in how much money these universities are taking in from ESPN and all the other television sources of revenue. And the players, they certainly get taken care of. They are treated like royalty when they're on campus, and I certainly don't doubt that they are being taken care of in other ways that aren't necessarily known publicly. But, hey, the players are responsible for all the money that's being made by the CFB committee and the playoff committee and by the universities. So they should definitely have some kind of say in their football career and in their future.
And Van Earl, you know I'm a big Steelers fan, and now we've got more drama coming out of Pittsburgh than I would have ever guessed could have ever happened in my lifetime, happening now in the last year or so. And this whole Antonio Brown situation is driving me nuts. I hope they trade him somewhere and all that sort of thing. I want to get your thoughts. We got him. We got Leonard Fournette issue down in Jacksonville. Throw in Jalen Ramsey while you're in Jacksonville as well. What do you make of this whole diva situation we're seeing right now?
I sound like I'm contradicting myself. I just said that the college players should have all the freedom in the world and have more rights to determine their future. But the behavior of so-called professionals like Antonio Brown and Jalen Ramsey in Jacksonville is absolutely nauseating. And I hope that the Steelers stick to their bloodlines, their tradition, their history, and not allow one player to infect the locker room the way Antonio Brown has. I know that Antonio had a very tough upbringing, and I think he's got the mentality of an eighth grader. He's never had any real direction, and one of the worst choices he ever made in his life was hiring Drew Rosenhaus, an absolute scumbag, to be his agent and to be his so-called guidance counselor right now, because that guy is absolutely he makes Donald Trump look like freaking Gandhi, man. The Rosenhaus guy is absolute scum and poison, and he's only concerned about his own money, and that's why he expresses concern about a guy like Antonio, because that affects his income. And he is infecting Antonio because he is giving him the message that it's all about him. In the ultimate team sport, it is not all about one guy. The quarterback is the most important person on the field. He gets paid the most. But as talented as Antonio is, get him the hell out of there and send him to the bottom of the NFL. I guess that's San Francisco or Arizona right now. I mean, send him. It just disgusts me, especially such a fantastic franchise as Pittsburgh, and the way that they're trying not to appear to cater to him, but they know how talented he is. Nobody's that talented. Get him the hell out of there.
Bob, questions for Van Earl?
Always great to have you on the show, Van Earl. And I want to take you back, and I think a lot of our listeners would like to know kind of your beginnings in the broadcast business. Like myself, you went to school in the 80s. And when did you first get the broadcasting bug, Van Earl? Was it in high school? And who were some of the early influences?
I remember my first thought about getting into broadcasting was in high school, reading an article about how reporters do their job in a publication called TV Guide. I don't know how many members of the audience out there remember TV Guide. But then when I went into college and I had a chance to work around the college radio station in South Carolina, and then I went down to a place in my hometown of Atlanta, some new business called Cable News Network in the summer of '82, 2 years old, and they offered an internship in the sports department, working with Nick Charles and Fred Hickman and Craig Sager and Jim Huber and other legends, and that's definitely what hooked me. Didn't bother me staying up till 2 a.m. logging baseball games on the West Coast. I was hooked. That's what I wanted to do, get paid to watch ball games. And the fact that we were getting paid $1.35 an hour as an intern was just fantastic.
It's all relative, buddy. And
that's right.
You mentioned the Atlanta native, et cetera, Van Earl. It brings me to the topic of Ted Turner in Turner Sports and the whole conglomerate and the man himself. What a life! Just an amazing person, and whether you like him or not, his accomplishments are just beyond anybody's scope that I know. But tell us your dealings with him and more about the man that maybe some of us don't know.
I never had the chance to visit with Ted, but he has definitely always been, since that summer of '82, one of my heroes. That man changed the world. We are now in an information revolution, coming out of an information revolution, now in the middle of a tech revolution. But he changed the world because he heard about a satellite that could send a signal to more than just one market. And he put the Braves on the Superstation, and then it was CNN after that. And look at what we have now. Now it's, of course, it's become very divisive in the America that we live in now, with so much opinion, and CNN so much from the left side, and MSNBC from the left side, and Fox News from the right side. It's gotten a little out of control, but the man changed the world because he was an incredibly innovative thinker and fearless, absolutely fearless.
Venner, I want to get your thoughts on the Falcons here in town. And I think there was a lot of optimism year before last. You know, a young team. Most people didn't expect that the Falcons were going to be in the Super Bowl. They get there. Now, of course, they lose in excruciating fashion. But I think everyone sort of, you know, once they got over that, thought, well, you know what, this young team, you know, they'll continue to be back. And then they lose in the divisional round last year. This year, you know, finished 7-9. Your thoughts? Are the Falcons a team that are just now sort of snake bit because of what happened in the Super Bowl? Is this a team that can get over that? Because we certainly had a lot, you know, they've had a handful of offensive coordinators since. Kyle Shanahan being the mastermind of what got him to the Super Bowl. Is that the thing? Where do you find, where do you feel like the Falcons are at? And is this a team that can rebound and get back in it next year?
Well, as Bob mentioned, as an Atlanta native, the Falcons have been snake bit ever since they showed up in 1966. In Alec Hawkins' book, there's an old guy who played for the Baltimore Colts in their heyday with Artie Donovan and Johnny Unitas and Jimmy Orr and all those legendary Bubba Smiths and John Mackey. Alec Hawkins was exposed in the expansion draft and went from the Colts to the Falcons. And he said in his book, I knew I was in for a bad trip when they actually brought in a Falcon on him as the mascot for opening day, and that Falcon flew around Atlanta Fulton County Stadium 2 times, and then he flew the hell out of there. He knew that was a doomed franchise. But I still am not convinced. I don't think anybody's convinced that the Falcons will ever be able to forget blowing a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl against the mighty, mighty Patriots. I think that they are, you know, they're trying to think forward. I'm glad that Quinn got rid of Sarkisian, not qualified for the job. I think having Dirk Cutter available is a good thing, is a real break for the Falcons. I think hiring Mike Mularkey, who was the OC before Cutter was the OC with Ryan, I think that brings back some toughness, even though he's just the tight ends coach. What I don't like is that DQ is going to be trying to do the head coach and the defensive coordinator job at the same time. And I've never seen anybody in professional football succeed as both the GM and the head coach. Now, everybody talks about Belichick. And I know that he has a say, but he's not dealing with the details. So Dan Quinn cannot get stuck in the details of the head coach and the DC job. So I think it's just too much for one guy to handle 2 jobs in the NFL. So that makes me a little leery. But as soon as they lost the spine of their defense, when Keanu Neal went down, and then Deion Jones went down, and then they lost, I think it was Grady Jarrett for a while and another defensive lineman. I mean, in today's NFL, you just can't lose that many guys to injury and really have a chance. It's amazing the difference in the starters and the second team in the NFL. And we talk about the separation between the NFL and college, but it's just incredible. If you don't have all your 22 best guys out there, it's mighty tough to find success.
And Van Earl, another young team in town, the Atlanta Braves, certainly exceeded expectations last season, and boy, the arrow seems to be pointing up for those guys. What are your expectations for 2019 for the Braves?
Oh, but very high, and I think they have the talent with the Rookie of the Year, and I think they're building their pitching staff, which, of course, is the number one thing, just as important as the quarterback is to football. And I love the fact that they gave Brian Snitker an opportunity after being such a loyal employee to the franchise for some 40 years, and he finally got the chance to be the manager on the big league level, and he succeeded, and the players love playing for him. And it's great to see such a good person find success. And hopes are very high in Atlanta for the Braves. And as long as they can get some solid pitching, of course, the bullpen was their weakness last year. If they can pick up some help, they'll definitely have a chance to contend. It was great. I think they kind of over-exceeded some expectations last year by winning the division, but that's all right. It taught them, gave them a lesson in winning and gave them a test of October baseball. So only can be beneficial for the future.
Bob, one more for Van Earl before we let him go.
Sure, I'd just like to touch on pro basketball in the Atlanta area, Van Earl. I go back to the Pete Maravich, Lou Hudson days, and the Hawks over the last 2 years are 38 and 88, Van. I mean, they had a good stretch starting about 10 years ago. I mean, they had a good 5-year stretch. And it's just they're back. It must be one of the hardest things in the world to be a Hawks fan. I mean, we just don't hear about it much up here in New England. Talk about the franchise and where it's headed.
I have no idea. No idea. They spend $200 million renovating that arena, and still the only people showing up are two drunks and a bearded left. Funds are showing signs of developing some rhythm, but they're way too young to really do much this year. I really don't know anything about the coach, Pierce. He was with Philly, and, no personality out there to appeal to sell some tickets. They keep pushing Trae Young, and it's too much pressure on a kid that young, in my opinion. But then they score 142 points against Russell Westbrook and the Thunder. So what the hell is that all about? So maybe there's some talent there, just has to be developed. But the Hawks have just never caught the attention of the city since Dominique and Doc Rivers and Spud Webb were here. So that's a long time ago. 30 freaking years ago, man. Good Lord.
Right.
Wow.
Van Earl, before we let you go, remind our listeners how they can stay up to date with all the great things you're doing and follow you, whether it's online or it's on social media.
Just follow me on Twitter at Van Earl Wright, and I'll see what I can do to provoke a response.
Indeed. Well, Van Earl, thank you so much for taking time out of your night to come back and be a part of the show. It's always a thrill for Bob and I to get to spend some time with you. We hope you'll come back and join us again real soon, my friend.
You guys are super nice to me, and congrats on the continued success of the Thursday Night Tailgate show. Great to talk to you.
Thanks for coming on.
We appreciate you, Van Earl. Take care.
Peace.
That is the great Van Earl Wright. And like we say all the time, and we did in his intro, there isn't a better sports broadcaster anywhere on the planet than Van Earl Wright. His talents and his knowledge are second to none, and his broadcasting skills even better than that, Bob. I always have a great time when Van Earl's a part of the show.
And his bluntness, right, Chris?
I love that piece on Antonio Brown. I think he's spot on. I certainly hope They send him to NFL Siberia. I'm rooting for that.
Yeah, I just hope people that aren't listening to the show will be able to just catch that segment because it was worth tuning in, folks.